Hi, everyone. Welcome to Free Advice Friday. I am so excited about this week. I have Jane Friedman here with me, and I have to be honest, when I asked her if she wanted to join me, I didn't expect she'd say yes. I was expecting a no, I am Jane Friedman, but I don't know why I wasn't expecting it. She is the nicest, kindest, most generous person in the publishing industry. She gives so much content, it is absolutely ridiculous. And lots of us love to give content, but Jane knows what she's talking about. She has been, and Jane, I don't even know your whole bio, but I know what I know about you. You and I worked together when you were the executive director, and you ran the entire side of Writer's Digest and Writer's Market. You know all about all those thick books they put out, and the magazine and the programs they did, the silo, as Steve used to call it. And but since then, since F&W and Writer's Digest, you have gone on to become your own media content purveyor.
Yep.
And at janefriedman.com, you started out as an editor. You started out, and you even were doing some editing at some point. But now you're literally touring the world, speaking and talking to people about publishing. And thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Did I get the website right?
You did.
All right, guys, I'm going to drop that in the chat box just so you guys all subscribe to Jane. Jane's got something that I subscribe to called the Hot Sheet. Jane, can that be found on your website, or is that a different URL?
It can be found at my website. It also has its own URL at hotsheetpub.com.
hotsheetpub.com. Some of you may notice that this is not my normal background. I am doing Free Advice Friday this week from the glorious palatial comfort of my mother's guest room, where I'm visiting her. And so, Jane, let's just get into the questions. I've got so many people who have emailed questions this week. But as those of you know, those of you who join me live get precedence. You guys win. So I'm going to remind you that at the bottom of the bar, if you can't see it, just hover your mouse down at the bottom of the Zoom box, and a bar will pop up. Some people always have it up, some people don't. But what I want you to do is hover until you see the Q&A box, click on it, and leave your questions there. If I have a URL, if Jane talks about a website or a resource, I'll drop it in the chat box. This will be available as a replay unless Jane doesn't like how it goes. If she's allowed to say eh. But unless she doesn't like how it goes, it is being recorded, and it will be available on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Amy Collins, or on Free Advice Friday, which is amysadvice.com. And if Jane wants a copy of it for posterity, I will happily send it to her. Jane, thank you for joining us again this morning.
Thank you.
Great. Now let's get into the first questions. People have not typed it into the Q&A yet, but don't worry. I am all queued up here with the questions people have been emailing me all week. So the first question somebody asked was from a woman named Donna. We try not to use last names because I'm horrible at pronouncing people. Donna actually has 11 books, 7 of them originally with St. Martin's Press, and 4 as an indie. She's done both, traditional and indie. But at the moment, she's rewriting. She got the rights back to her first book with St. Martin's Press. It was a mystery, and she's rewriting it to get it more in line with what her original vision, which was not so much the cozy mystery ending. It's a slightly different ending from the formula. And what she'd like to do is ask your advice. What do you think about giving away alternate endings of a book as either a marketing idea? Are there any downsides that you can think of? I thought it was a brilliant idea for marketing, but I was just curious, have you ever experienced that? Is there anything we're not thinking of if somebody wanted to offer alternate endings to their book as a giveaway?
No, I think that's a brilliant idea. And most independent authors have some sort of ancillary story, or whether it's like a novella sort of spin-off or a short story or alternate endings or something like that, that especially fills in the gaps in between books. I don't know how often Donna's releasing, but if you're only releasing 1 or 2 titles a year, especially if you're independently publishing, it's really helpful to have something come in between or as a reader magnet to get more people onto your email newsletter list. So I would, at the very least, try to get some email addresses out of giving that alternate ending away. There are lots of ways to do that. Some of my favorite resources or tools would be BookFunnel or Story Origin. Those are the two I tend to see most often used successfully. And that way you can do the giveaway and get something out of it.
I love BookFunnel. Now, I don't know if Jane has a link for BookFunnel, but
I do.
Well, I have the URL, but I mean, if you've got a special link, just email. You don't have a special, like, okay.
Nope.
So guys, I'll just drop BookFunnel. I've got their URL right here. I will drop BookFunnel into the amysadvice.com webpage when I upload this as a replay, and all of these links will be right under the video. Jane, you said something interesting, and I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to ask her a question now because I don't get to see her every day like I did when we worked together. Jane, you just said if you're only publishing 1 or 2 books a year as an indie author, how many books a year have you seen people publish, and do you have, especially for a novelist or a fiction writer, do you have any advice for self-published authors as to frequency?
Well, first rule is do what's sustainable. I hate to see people burn out and create a situation where they basically hate the career they've chosen. That said, I do see genre novelists in particular releasing 3 to 6 titles per year, depending on how competitive their category is or what sort of series that they're working on. Romance in particular, I think that's the high pressure genre to be in, where you see people doing rapid releasing. Rapid releasing is where you will release, let's say, 3 titles in fairly quick succession, like within 1 or 2 months of each other. It doesn't mean you're writing the books in 1 or 2 months necessarily, but you hold them so that you can rapid release. And the reason for that is simply visibility on Amazon and keeping a steady stream of sales going.
Exactly. We have a couple of people who join us on Free Advice Friday who have 1 book, and I love those books. But you guys know who I'm talking about. One begins with an S, one begins with an A. And guys, it's time for more books. More books is definitely the way to go. All right. Jane, we have a note here from David, who really appreciates you being here. Everyone just adores it. How do you get so adored? Gosh, it is ridiculous.
I've been around a long time. I haven't given up.
All right, so David published 2 books last year. He plans to publish 2 again this year. So, David, you're right on her schedule. He didn't pay much attention at the beginning to the number of books he was selling, but he published both books with Ingram Spark, and he does get a monthly report. His question is there any software or any advice you have about tracking sales outside of Ingram Spark? And Jane, we get this question a lot. How do you know that what Ingram Spark is telling you is true? Is there another way to double check? Is there a business method that will, or a service, and we'll talk about BookScan in a minute, but he's looking for, a business and accounting solution, which we're not accountants, guys, but I love QuickBooks. But he wants to know about tools or methods to double check sales to see how things are going.
Well, it sounds like there might be 2 things that he's looking for. One is like verification that these numbers are what Ingram says they are. That's really hard to get, but as you said, we can talk about BookScan if you like. Mm-hmm. And then there are like publisher level softwares that do this. So like, for instance, there's a solution from a company called Metacomet, but these are really expensive softwares that are typically to help calculate royalties. So they're not priced for the average author, but they're doing kind of what all of the accounting, you might say, where you put in all of the different files from sales outlets, and then it kind of makes sense of it all. Mm-hmm. The author level solution for this you can find from Publish Drive. That's an ebook distributor. And I can't think of what they call it off the top of my head, but if you go to publishdrive.com, you will find the name of that service. I don't think it requires using Publish Drive as a distributor, but don't quote me on that. But they're the only ones that I've seen with something that I would consider more advanced that would allow you to track sales. There's also something called, I'm not going to remember the name of this one either since I don't use it, but it's a sales tracker just for Amazon sales. And I don't know that this would be helpful.
Is that Jungle Scout?
Not Jungle Scout.
Right?
No. But But Amy, you might know some better tools in this area.
No, I don't. I did know about Publish Drive, but I didn't realize. And I went to publishdrive.com, and Jane is right. If you type in your email, they ask for your email, they will give you access to management tools without you having to be distributed by them. I just did it on my phone while Jane was talking. And the way most authors with fewer than 10 books do it, truthfully, David, is Excel. You go to Draft to Digital, you go to Kobo, you go to Barnes & Noble /Pubbit /Nook, whatever they're called this minute. You go to KDP, you go to Ingram Spark, you go to all the places where you've chosen to distribute every month, and you quickly just download in a CSV file or an Excel what your sales were for the previous month, and I just cut and paste them into an Excel sheet. Truthfully, with 4 books, I don't know if it's really necessary to start spending money on any sort of bookkeeping. Now, I use QuickBooks for my publishing arm because of all the expenses, and I really love at the end of the year being able to generate a report that said, I spent far more money than I made on my books, but it helps tax-wise. And when it comes to verifying whether or not you've got all the sales, you can trust Ingram Spark. You can trust Ingram. They have external auditors that come in quarterly to review everything. They have to. Because they're not only a US-based company, but they distribute internationally, and there are laws again, about distributing books overseas, and there's trucking manifests, and you're good. Don't worry about Ingram. Don't worry about your ebooks. Draft to Digital has more integrity than, they're a wonderful company. Whether or not you are getting a true and accurate report from Amazon or KDP, if you truly doubt it, you can always, it's part of your contract, you can always get an external audit. But again, that's a little expensive. But I would really focus most of my energy on marketing and selling my book, and not worry about whether or not 1 or 2 books is slipping through the cracks. But that having been said, you are allowed through your Author Central account, Author Central on Amazon, there's a report tab in the upper top third on the right of your authorcentral.amazon.com page that will allow you to see the last year, the last 13 weeks, the last month, the last week of your book scan sales. And for your own books, as long as you've claimed them on authorcentral.com, you have lifetime access to your own book scan numbers. And if they don't match up, or if it seems like something isn't right, then it's time to call an accountant. Thank you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I put into chat the tool that I couldn't remember that was Amazon only, if you just want a prettier way of looking at Amazon sales.
Oh, Jane, thank you. And what's that called?
It's called Book Report.
Oh, see, this is why we have her here. All right. Somebody is asking, she asked a while back what to do about an agent, a lit agent, who hasn't responded to a partial manuscript she requested. The agent requested the partial manuscript. She hasn't responded in 90 days. The author's tried contacting her and asking for a status update, but she's getting no response. Now it's been almost 6 months since she sent in the requested partial manuscript of 100 pages. Still no response from the agent. Should she take this silence to mean she's not interested? Should she keep waiting? The website doesn't give an estimated amount of time. Jane, do you have any experience with this?
I don't have personal experience where an agent has ghosted me, but many, many, many of my clients have been ghosted by agents where they are not yet represented. Frankly, actually, agents even ghost their own clients. So it's not unusual. And I'm sorry this has happened to you. Unfortunately, if they've been silent for this long and they're not responding to follow-up emails, I think it's time to just move on. Agents are humans like anyone else. They just, after a certain amount of time of not responding to you, they start to feel bad. They might feel ashamed. They're like, I don't even want to it becomes this emotional weight, and they don't want to engage. So I'm sorry that they don't have the courtesy to at least say, no, I'm not interested, but that's probably where you're at.
All right, Jane, thank you for that. Caroline recently tried and is liking Query Tracker. Now, I know you're aware of Query Tracker, and for those of you who aren't, it's a really good starting site. But Caroline wants to know the best way to pick the first 3 to 4 agents to query. She writes contemporary thrillers, historical fiction, poetry. She said nobody wants her. But if when you've got somebody who is getting started and wants to pick the first few agents, Do you have any advice on how to get started and how many agents to query before you give it a break and wait for some responses?
Usually I suggest compiling as full of it or as long as of an agent list as possible up front. So this might mean you have 50 agents, let's say, maybe even 100. It depends on the genre and if it's a very like something that every agent is looking for, some sort of commercial fiction project. Then I think it's really helpful to divide those agents into, say, roughly 3 categories. Your A category, where they're basically a perfect fit as far as you can tell, then a good fit, or they seem like they would be totally fine representing you, but maybe they're not your dream agent. And then the maybes, or your backups. So think about it as ABC sorts of agents. I recommend that authors try a first submission round to about, say, 6. Let's say your list is 50. Try 6 at first, maybe 10, and take a few from each bucket. A couple A's, a couple B's, a couple C's. And send out your first round and see what sort of response you get. If you immediately hear back from your A's or your B's, then that tells you that you probably have something that's really appealing in the current market that the agents are responding to. And then you can decide if you want to then send out a few more to some more of your A's and B's in order to gin up a bidding war among the agents. If you get silence or things just trickle in, then I would continue with the same process as many times as you need to until you exhaust your full list.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for that. Jane, I don't believe you wrote it. Well, you may have. I think you interviewed somebody about a year and a half ago. I have actually hot linked this blog that you wrote, an article you wrote about copyright, everything you need to know about copyright. But I know you also have some information. You have written more than one book on the publishing world. What are the names of some of the books that you have out there? For instance, you did one with the University Press 2 years ago that is still like #1 in the category. What's that called?
The Business of Being a Writer.
All right. Well,
So
the business of being a writer is one of those things that that again, we don't offer legal advice here. But Jane has more business experience in this published. Oh my gosh! Hi. What is his name?
It's a she. Her name is Zelda.
Hi, Zelda. Well, I figured it was a boy because the cat was totally oblivious, and so I figured it was male. Oh, hi, Zelda. Now, Zelda's the one who you've recently had to change her diet, right?
That's right.
Reading on Facebook. Yes, I stalk you on Facebook, just for the record. All right, guys, everyone say hi to Zelda. Usually Marley's here with me, but I love that Zelda's there with Jane. Guys, so the question that Wendy has, and again, only if it's something that you feel you've got some experience in. Wendy, one of our regular listeners, put a book out a few years ago using a lot of different people's quotes. And she copyrighted the book. However, she found out later that a few of the quotes, she did not have the author's permission. She thought she did. It was a total mistake. But she's copyrighted the book without a couple people's author's permission. She has since created a new edition of the book, taking those quotes out. She did it immediately. Mm-hmm. But she wants to know, what does she do with the fact that she copyrighted a book that has somebody else's quotes in it? Does she need to re-register the copyright? Do you have any idea what you do when you have to put a new version of a book out for something like this?
If it's a second edition of the same book, basically, let's say somewhere between 10% and 30% of the book changed. Actually, it doesn't matter if you've changed the work in any sort of substantive way, and it sounds like you have by taking out these quotes, then you should re-register the copyright with the Copyright Office. So I would go ahead and do that. And when whatever process you go through, there is a way to tell the Copyright Office, this is a re-registration of already published work and I'm updating it.
Now, thank you. I did not know that, so that's wonderful. But something is here that I do know. Wendy is saying, do I have to repay the $55? Wendy, it's not $55 to register a copyright. So I'm wondering if you went through a service or, so for those of you who are a little tight on budget, just so you know, you don't need to pay someone to register your copyright for you. Wendy, I know you. You're smarter than any 3 people I know combined. You can go to the website and download the form and and register your own copyright. It's not $55. Jane, am I off on that? Is there anything I'm missing?
I don't think so.
Yeah, no, it doesn't cost $55 to register a copyright. So, so good. Wendy, thank you. Thank you for that great question. All right. Stephen is asking, Jane, do you have any recommendation to make the most of media, like radio interviews, blogs, podcasts? What makes a good media appearance that will appeal? And I'm going to start by saying, what kind of media do you need to get an agent or a publisher's attention?
So the goal of the media attention is to land a publisher or an agent, in other words.
For my question, not Stephen's. I'll ask you his in a minute.
Yeah. I mean, it's so much depends on the category of book and the size of the publisher. I mean, if it's a big 5 publisher, they're looking for national media attention, typically, New York Times, NPR sort of stuff. Smaller publishers, they may be paying attention to really much more niche or regional publications. So if you have a really significant profile in a publication or in a media outlet that matters to them, you're likely going to hear from them. So you just have to kind of have a sense of what are the most important publications to that agent or publisher for your category. And then what was the second part of the question?
Well, the second question, I'm going to jump in and answer a little bit, and then I'll ask you. But Stephen's asking, what do you do to make the most of the media that you've gotten? Podcasts, radio interviews, reviews, anything, interviews. And Stephen, this is my rule of thumb. Again, you don't want to pepper the internet with all about you. That's obnoxious. But creating a series of either Facebook posts and Twitter posts and LinkedIn articles where you're sharing an interview that you did, a podcast that you did, a video thing like Jane's doing now. And I use either Hootsuite or Recur Post, but you can schedule those to be republished every 3-4 weeks. Every 3-4 weeks, if I do a particularly good interview with Jane, it's going to be all over social media for the next 2 days. If I really screw this up, it's going to be buried and no one's going to see it. But if I like, let's say my lipstick looks good and she doesn't say, the F word on camera, then 3-4 weeks from now, you're going to see her face again because I'm going to share it again. And 4 months later, I'm going to share it again. It's going to be on my website. Hopefully Jane's going to put some links on her site. I'm going to, I have a sheet, an author sheet as seen on, when I'm interviewed on a blog that I particularly like, I will take their logo, I'll put it on my website. Logos are big. It's nice that it says, Jane Friedman, but you guys notice from the email I sent you, I grabbed, sorry, Jane, I didn't ask your permission. I grabbed her logo. I put it in the email. Logos grab people's attention. So if you're on even a local NPR or NBC or whatever, what I want you to do is grab those logos, put it on your author sheet, put it in your marketing kit, put it everywhere. Do not be shy, but do not be obnoxious. So there's the balance. You can't hide your light under a bushel, but for the love of God, stop blinding people with all about you. So, Stephen, my answer is it depends, but I use a one-time, a 2 to 3 week later, a 4-month, and then a 1-year move out for all of my media. Because unless it's very dated, if I was writing an article about the 50th anniversary of something, well, then I shouldn't do it a year late. Well, maybe I should for the 51st. Jane, that's my answer. Do you have any thoughts?
No, that's perfect. I think you covered the best points.
Well, I talk a lot. So, all right. So guys, so many questions. You guys are doing great, but don't worry. Jane's here. She's not going anywhere. She promised to stay right up until 11. All right. We have a question here. Oh, okay. I loved this question. Two people have asked, do you have a recommendation for whether or not people need to get insurance when they're self-publishing a book? Do people need to get some sort of book insurance or publishing insurance when they're publishing books? Is there some sort of special insurance they need to get?
There is insurance that you can buy, but most authors, I would venture to guess 95%, if not 99% of authors do not purchase this insurance. It tends to be quite expensive, and it's actually hard to get approved for it. if you were going to buy it, I would encourage you to take a look at the Authors Guild, becoming a member. Membership isn't that expensive. I think it's probably less than $100, or maybe it's like $120 or something. But it's worth every penny if you're intending to buy that insurance, because they have a relationship with the company, and it'll increase the chances that you can get something you can afford and that you'll be approved for it. Although it does not guarantee you will get approved. This
And
isn't
what
it.
type of insurance is that?
There are two types of insurance, and I'm not confident about the names of either, but we're talking about like a media liability sort of insurance that has to cover the book. I think there's also maybe errors and omissions
That's
types
the
of
kind I
insurance.
have, just so you guys know.
Yeah.
Media liability, and I'm an English major with a music degree, but media liability is a smaller version. E&O is a more expensive but more all-encompassing sort of insurance, and it's not necessary unless you're publishing other people for the most part.
So that's what I know. Yeah.
But I didn't know that. So it's the Authors Guild?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So for those of you who are nervous and want insurance, and I don't think it's a bad idea, depending on, especially if you're a nonfiction author. Not many people sue romance novelists for, for liability, but if you're a doctor or something, you might want to, yeah, so that's great advice. Thank you. Jane, Tara, hi Tara, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. She typically writes full-length books, but she's thinking about dabbling around in Kindle Shorts. And she wants to know if you have any advice. Do you know anything about Kindle Shorts? Do you think it's worth it? Is there any particular genre that you would recommend either stay away or do it?
I might ask a clarifying question if she's able, or if you know.
Of course.
I
Tara,
don't.
just go, and Jane's going to ask you a question.
So I don't think there might have in the past been a Kindle Shorts program, but if there is any kind of formal program now, it's not like open to submissions from authors. So when you say Kindle Shorts, are you just using that as shorthand for if I publish something really short myself on Kindle? I just didn't know if Tara's referring to a formal program or not that may have been kind of closed off to authors.
Got it. Well, thank you for that. Tara, please, if you go to the bottom of the Q&A box and just type in an answer. So if indeed you're just talking about short stories, short fiction, I want to tell you that Paula Munet, just for Valentine's Day, put out a short story. And she got it up specifically for Valentine's Day. She offered it at a deep, deep discount. It was a beautiful little short story that ties in with her love of dogs and the fact that her second book came out. And she got just under 5,000 downloads in one day. Yeah. And so, again, it was an ebook only. It worked for her beautifully. But Paula tied it in with her own fan base. We promoted the heck out of it. We advertised it. Advertising was key. And she's known now for writing mysteries about dogs and rescue dogs. And the short story was a romance novel about a rescue dog, and it was called Rescue Me. And so it all tied in. If you write nothing but, vampire dinosaur fiction, and all of a sudden you want to write a cozy mystery that takes place in the Scottish Highlands, you may not get the same results. But I love short stories on Amazon.
I know it used to be more popular to do these short stories on Amazon when they were on a different payment model for Kindle Unlimited, before they moved to the page read model. And what I'm seeing more emerging is not that people won't put their short stories on Kindle. Obviously, you can still do that and charge, 99 cents or whatever. But I'm seeing it more as a reward for people on Patreon, for example, those who have like a patronage model there, or using it, as we discussed earlier, as a reader magnet rather than trying to sell it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for those of you who are saying, but it's my story, I don't want to give it away, you're a writer. Write more stories. It's fine. Yeah, you should be so lucky. Jane, I know that you have spent your careers, or a lot of your career, more on the editorial side, but I also know that you're teaching classes on a somewhat regular basis now about the business side and the marketing side of publishing. You're one of the few people I know who your experience does cover a lot. Do you have any classes coming up, anything that you're teaching or that you are doing online through your own organization that you want to tell people about?
Sure. Next week, in fact, I'm doing an online class about improving your author website. So it's ideal for people who already have a website up and running and you're trying to take it to the next level. I know a lot of people struggle with homepage design in particular, or what information to put on their book product, like on their dedicated book page. So I'll be covering like all of the most important pages of your site and then how to think about the structure of the information.
Terrific. And for those of you who are watching this on a replay, and perhaps that class has passed, janefriedman.com, just click on the link right below this video, whatever format you're watching this in, whatever venue you're on. Jane, your classes, I'm assuming, are listed there, all the current ones that you have?
They are.
And guys, her blog, you have to subscribe to her blog. As well, I mean, the hot sheet is a little bit more industry based, but Jane, I have learned so much just from your very generous free blog that you put out on a regular basis. The articles are amazing.
Thank you.
So guys, go to janefriedman.com. While I now hit her up with more questions. How you doing, Jane? You need a drink? You all set?
I'm all set.
All right, good, good, good. Caroline has tried a lot of different advertising options. Nothing really seems to have worked. Spending money on advertising is not working for her, but she also has reached out, it looks like, to many, many reviewers. She's got a book and the ads are not working and she's not getting any responses from the reviewers. Do you have any, I've got a three-part question for you based on Caroline's experience here, because I'm reading a couple of questions from her. My first question is, have you ever heard, and do you have any advice for someone who's tried to get reviews and they're hearing crickets back? Thoughts?
It's a question I would love to hear you answer, because I don't have a good solution to non-response from reviewers. It's a blood, sweat, and tears process. And sometimes, though, I think people end up going too far outside of their own circle for the reviews. So rather than staying close to home with where they do their review outreach, they're going straight to the national level. So instead of going to your local or regional media, you go right to the New York Times. And so that's usually one of the classic mistakes I see when trying to get reviews. But it may be that you're reaching out to bloggers or maybe other Amazon reviewers that are clearly reviewing in your category. But I think anytime you approach someone cold, someone who has never heard of you, doesn't have any relationship to your work, it always makes it very difficult. And you're only going to probably have, on average, a 5 to 10% success rate. So I don't think sometimes people realize that the success rate for everybody is really, really low. But Amy, I'd love to hear your tips on this one.
I want to hire you because I've never had a 5 to 10% success rate. I get about a 2 to 3% success response. I get responses.
Right.
And a lot of the responses I get are, I did not like this book. Are you sure you want me to review it?
Oh, goodness.
But guys, if you have reached out to 7 reviewers and they haven't gotten back to you, that's not, I have had a couple of clients start out conversations with me by saying, I reached out to 20 reviewers and nobody reviewed my book. Well, yeah, that's not enough. There are hundreds of reviewers out there, and maybe there's not hundreds of reviewers that focus on your particular type of book, but if you've reached out to fewer than 50 reviewers and you're complaining that you haven't heard back, you haven't done enough. So that's my first thing. Did you read individually their submission requirements? Do they require your book 3 months before publication or 5 months before publication? Do they require an ebook because they don't like paper? Do they prefer paper and they don't like ebook? Or did you just do a mass mailing? Did you just kind of go to Gmail and do a mail merge and mail out? Because that's not how it works either. I know when I get a mass mailing and with 400 or 500 emails a day coming in, I'm delete, 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 delete. Not because I don't love you guys, but if you haven't actually written me, I do not have the time to answer. So did you craft a specific pitch? And the final thing is, if you have reached out to over 50 reviewers, and if you did it individually, and if you followed their submission requirements, and you still haven't heard back from anyone, have you given it enough time? Do you have any idea how long it takes to get, I mean, some of these people It takes them 2 months to answer an email and then 4 months to write a review.
Mhm.
So a lot of these people are reading books that, I mean, right now, Jane and I are talking, it's the end of February. I have reviews that are just hitting now that I submitted the books in October. Not because the reviewers don't like me, although some of them don't, but they were reading books that they're just now getting in October. So that's my very long take on that.
Yeah, I just want to say the personalized nature of the approach, like even if you don't know the person, just customizing that pitch for that person. I would say for me, 49 out of 50 pitches I get that relate to review or coverage, they do not recognize what I do whatsoever. It's just a kind of a mass mailing, and like you said, it's delete. So
And personal recommendations. If you know anyone, I'm begging you guys, if you are really authors, then I am begging you to make sure that you join your professional organizations for your genre, that you join author groups, get to know other authors, create a community or join a community that's already created, because you guys can help each other out. If Alan got a terrific review from Drew Rummer, then maybe Alan can write a quick introductory email for you, Caroline, and say, hey, Drew, Caroline has written a great new book I thought I'd introduce you to. That goes a long way. So join your community. It takes a little bit of effort. There is no mail merge aspect. There was 15 years ago, it was possible to spray and pray. Those days are over. You have to be very, very careful and curated now. Now, Stephen is asking, Jane, if you and I are talking about professional reviews, blogger reviews, or Amazon reviews. Yes, all three. I will remind you guys, for those of you who are listening, you are not allowed to solicit Amazon reviews anymore. You were allowed to. I want to just again reiterate that there's new rules. You are not allowed to ask for an Amazon review. You are allowed to contact top Amazon reviewers and ask if they'd like a review copy of your book. Please understand the difference. Soliciting a review from Amazon, putting a note in a note saying that, for every 5-star review, you'll get a something. No, I got one of those literally this week. Please read the Amazon.com community guidelines for asking for reviews. You are not allowed to solicit reviews anymore. Those days are over, but you are allowed to offer review copies. Just keep that in mind. I know I keep harping on that, but too many of my friends are getting blocked, and their books are getting, their reviews are getting taken down. All right, let's see. Anonymous says, may I ask a very specific question? Well, I don't know, Anonymous. Let's see what it is. Anonymous is a nonfiction author looking for an agent for their first book. The first few chapters have references that they cite in the text. First few chapters have references that they cite in the text. When they're asked by an agent to submit either the first 30 pages or to submit chapters, should they include the references, which take up at least a couple of pages? So should the references be included in the first 10 pages or 30 pages, whatever they're asked for?
So I assume these would be like footnotes or endnotes or something. No, it is totally not important. I would probably not take up page space sending those at the end.
All right. Jane, I'm going to, guys, Caroline and Stephen and John, I'm seeing the same question from a couple people. So, Jane, I'm just going to ask you, what, if anything, do you know about book or book to TV or movie rights? Anything at all? Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah.
Great. I didn't want to hit you with stuff that, do you have any general overarching advice? Now, and for those of you who are curious, remember, Free Advice Friday last fall had Anna Termini on. Anna Termini is the former Sage and current ProQuest agent for all of the ancillary and international, but also movie and TV rights. And we've got an entire interview with her where she goes line by line how to find someone to submit to and how to submit. So we're not going to get into that today, but I am curious, Jane, about your advice about, with this new world of streaming and with everything going on, what is your advice? Do you have any thoughts about how to submit an actual already published book for TV, streaming, or movie rights?
It's true that there are considerable opportunities that didn't exist, like even 5 or 10 years ago. And it is an area where Hollywood and all the people working for streaming services are hungry for existing intellectual property. However, if you are primarily a book author and you have never dealt in that world, and I consider it very different than publishing, then I really encourage you to work through an agent if at all possible. And I know that's like it's like the big barrier, but it is so hard to enter into that world with your book as an author. You need someone to help package it for you. And I'm using the word package very deliberately because, it has to be spun in the right way. It has to have the right talent attached. It has to be presented as this thing that is very juicy and attractive to people who make deals. And then it's like pushing a 5 billion ton boulder up a mountain to get it made. So I think it's one thing to get something optioned. So an option is when someone is purchasing the rights to make something based on your book. Most things that are optioned never see the light of day, but you still pocket some money. And I think there's that old quote from Ernest Hemingway that, if you have something that might work for Hollywood, go to the border of California and throw it over the fence and then run in the other direction, which I think is about right. So, I mean, this isn't necessarily very much how-to advice other than, except don't expect that you're going to do this on your own. I know there are a lot of services out there that promise to take a look at your book and then try and get you a book to film or book to screen deal. I think Tailflick is one of the most popular, and it's a modest fee, but the success rate is so low that I'm not sure that like if you have that money to burn, sure, but I don't know that it's worth it to pursue unless you already have an agent who can help.
And Tailflick is legit, but they are being looked at a little askance because the vast majority of the deals that they sign with people are with their own production company. And so I like Tailflick, but just be careful.
Yeah, exactly. So it sounds like the interview you did, I didn't catch her name, but that sounds like an excellent thing to listen to. If you do want to get serious about trying to find someone to represent you, you've got to have representation of some kind.
All right. Well, that's a wonderful answer, and I agree with it. Jane, we'll edit this part out. We can just do live if you don't want to go on record. But I'm curious. A couple people are asking, and I'm going to rephrase the question. What do you think of Goodreads in terms of its usefulness for marketing purposes or reaching readers? Do you have any opinion on Goodreads?
For most self-published authors, I don't find it all that useful. I know that traditional publishers are able to do some very important pre-publication campaigns there using giveaways. So by the time the book releases, then there's already a lot of conversation and reviews that are on Goodreads, and that sort of activity doesn't happen on Amazon pre-publication before the book releases. So Goodreads is a good avenue for traditional publishers to amp up that buzz. I don't necessarily find that's possible or useful for most self-publishing authors, but it doesn't hurt to have your Goodreads profile there. Fill out, be a completist about that profile, make it easy for people to find your books there, add it to their shelves. But then you have to be super cautious that you do not take those reviews, the bad ones, personally. You can't respond to those people. You don't want to get into an argument with someone who has treated your book unfairly. You just do not engage with the negativity that you might find. But other than that, it's a perfectly fine thing to have a profile.
Yeah. All right. But guys, I completely echo her advice. And again, if you're reading articles, and I wrote a blog about this the other day, if you're reading articles that rave about Library Thing or Goodreads for their marketing services, I love that. Check the date. For those of you who are asking about Library Thing and Goodreads, understand that Library Thing last fall shut down access to its early reader program to all self-published or small presses. You now need to be a larger house to submit to Library Thing. Things change fast. And my advice to you is if the article you're reading is more than 6 weeks old, um, take it, but keep looking. Things change so fast now, especially on Amazon, but on Goodreads. There are rules that, and there are things that people are trying to do on Goodreads because last fall or last summer, there was an article saying, hey, have you tried this giveaway? And either the giveaway, Kindle Shorts, doesn't exist anymore. And so, guys, keep an eye on the dates of the things that you're reading. I love Google. I love Google, but we have to be smart about the date. Jane, we've got 15 more minutes, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to mush a bunch of questions together. There's a number of questions. We have over 30 questions still to be answered, which we're not going to get to them all. But guys, questions where Google can answer, like how to do something, or what is Author Guild good for? Love that question, but they've got a list on their website. I'm gonna just try and answer the questions of Jane's opinion and her experience, if that helps. Jane, going narrow on Kindle Unlimited and Kindle Select, KDP Select, or going wide, especially during your launch. Thoughts, ideas?
There are so many opinions on this. And I think some of it's driven by also principle, because there's some people who do not want to give any more power to Amazon than they already have. And so being exclusive with Amazon, of course, gives them more power in the market. So I'm just going to set aside any sort of moral, ethical, principle sort of stance and just look at it from a business perspective. What I see many genre fiction authors doing is they might release first narrowly or exclusively with Amazon on Kindle Unlimited and ride that wave for maybe a year and then go wide. Or maybe it's not 1 year, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it just depends on your category and how many books also that you have on the market, how you might approach this. So I am seeing that phenomenon in the genre fiction market. With nonfiction authors, I tend to see wide as the more prevalent model. So going wide from the very beginning. Again, I don't think there's a right answer, and some of this has to depend on where you think your readership lies. If you think that if they're where they live geographically, since Kobo can be very important. If there's anyone dialing in from Canada or the UK, you're going to be probably more concerned with going wide and not sticking with Amazon. But the more you're in the US, the more you're in the genre fiction market with that really voracious readership, maybe the more you benefit from having those books in Kindle Unlimited.
All right. That is exactly what I tell people. I don't do it as eloquently as you did. My rule of thumb for fiction is 90 to 180 days, as KDP Select and Kindle Unlimited is very reasonable for fiction. Mm-hmm. Because and gauge and see what sort of income you're getting from Kindle Unlimited. You don't want to, Kindle Unlimited is great. Again, keep in mind, you guys who know me, I have no soul. I have absolutely no compunction about, as long as I'm, if you're making money, great. But there are a lot of people, and Orna Ross, whom I respect more than anyone, she's a big proponent of always going wide and never giving Amazon exclusivity. There's a lot of reasons for that. It is a personal decision, but for fiction, sometimes the benefits of getting that Kindle Unlimited, you just, that money could be used to market your book wide six months from now.
Right.
I don't like going longer than 6 months. That's my rule of thumb for my authors, but there's lots of things that are, again, and they're changing. If you're watching this on a replay and it's after March 19th, 2020, take everything we're saying with a grain of salt, because if you're listening, we said that every 6 weeks things change. So please keep in mind that this is advice as of February 2020. Mary's asking if it's acceptable, and I'm going to say not only acceptable, it's a wonderful idea. She wants to know if it's acceptable to mention existing endorsements, testimonials, or reviews, or to actually show them if you're asking for testimonials, endorsements, and reviews from someone else. Are you allowed to say, well, so-and-so said this, and I'd love your opinion?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Mary. Thanks for playing. And we're moving on. Every single time, if somebody gives you a testimonial, an endorsement, and remember, guys, testimonials are free, endorsements are paid for. So please do not use those two phrases interchangeably. We do in the publishing industry. I get it. But But when you're asking someone for an endorsement, you are in essence, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that in other industries, endorsements means there's an exchange. If you're asking for a testimonial, that's different. Right, Jane, am I missing? Is that?
That's right.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm not, I'm a little careful about people who use those two phrases interchangeably. All right, I'm going to go back to the email because there were one or two people. Jane, I want to talk to you about covers. The cover of your book. Now, remind me the name of your book.
The Business of Being a Writer.
The Business of Being a Writer. And it was put out by which university press?
University of Chicago.
Oh, yeah, small little company, University of Chicago. No one's heard of them. But Jane, I want to talk to you about book covers for a second. I'm going to share my screen because one of my regular followers she's trying to do her own cover. And she wants to know if you have any, she's actually in our genre. She's putting together a book of how to hire a book shepherd, how to hire an editor. However, she's got a couple of different cover designs, and I'm showing one here. Can you guys see that?
I can definitely see it.
Well, then that means everyone can. And she wants to know, and she's got a number of questions, but my question for you, Jane, is if somebody's going to self-publish, do you have advice for them on how to go about creating or getting a good cover created?
Hire a professional designer, assuming you have the budget.
Thank you.
And if you don't, there are lots of designers who do pre-made covers, which, I guess it's not ideal, but that would be better than doing it yourself. So should I critique this cover?
If you'd like to. I wasn't going to ask.
Okay. I think there are definitely a couple issues that will need to be resolved if we're not hiring a designer. The subtitle is overpowering the main title. So we don't want the title, like the title almost gets lost here. So usually the subtitle appears under the main title. So that would immediately help. The main title, Self-Publishing Wizard or Wannabe, probably needs to be bigger, needs to be more readable. I don't know if you're going to be able to keep the chalk font. Maybe if you can make it a little bolder, but I'm not sure about that. And I would also, and I know this isn't really necessarily about the cover, but I would also think further about that title. I'm not sure what it's saying. Certainly the subtitle tells and sells, but I think you might want to think about what that title is conveying. I don't know what the book's really about from the title alone.
Yeah, Jane, thank you for doing that. I did want you to critique it, but I didn't want to put you on the spot. Mary is a very talented, this is a good book, and so it deserves a good cover. And Mary, I know that you guys have heard me say this before, but a cover's job is to make you want to read the book description either on the back or on Amazon. That's the cover's only job. It only has one job, is to get you to flip the book over, or on Amazon to look at the book description. And then it's the book description's job to get you to read a few pages. And so please don't make the cover do more work than it's supposed to. And if a designer is not in the budget, using templates definitely helps, because there are rules. And one of the rules for a book cover is that it needs to be flowed. The title, the subtitle, the author name needs to be designed in such a way that your eye knows exactly where to go first, and then it flows to the next element. A really well-designed cover, your eye will immediately go to the title. It will flow down to the subtitle. You'll check out the author. Maybe indeed you don't want the author's name. Maybe next you want to see a quote from Obama on your cover. That's great. But a designer knows how to design it in a way so that all the space is taken up in a way that your eye doesn't need to think about where to look next. And right now, I don't know where to put my eye. Do I look at the fanned out book on the desk? Do I look at the title? There's at least, my eyes right now don't know where to go. And that means that the cover isn't done yet. That's my two cents on it, that anyone who's not a professional cover designer doesn't know how to, I don't know how to do that. I've been in publishing since Jesus was in short pants, and I don't know how to design a cover. So there's some great companies out there that do. And thank you, Jane, for that. Guys, we have 5 minutes left. I'm so sorry that we have not been able to get to everyone's question. But I think we got to all the questions that was asked. I am going to, Jane, ask you an overarching question that's going to encompass a lot of the still questions that are coming out. But before I do, remind us again about the classes that you're teaching. Do they just go to janefriedman.com to check out all the classes that you offer?
That's right, janefriedman.com, and there's a tab that says the online classes, and you'll see everything coming up.
You guys, you need to do this. You really do. janefriedman.com. Check out the online classes, check out the blog, subscribe to the hot sheet. If you truly are interested in getting into our industry, you've heard me say this, you have to, it's a whole new industry. You have to educate yourself. And Jane's hot sheet, and it's not just your hot sheet though, right? You and Porter.
Actually, it's just mine at this point.
My apologies. Okay. Yeah. We're going to edit that out. Jane's hot sheet is absolutely my go-to. I open it every time it comes. It's every other week, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So Jane, when you have an older book, especially nonfiction, but it's still completely valid, fiction or nonfiction, but your book is 2-3 years old and it never got the love that you wanted it to. I'm just going to ask you, what's your thoughts when someone comes to you with a 2 or 3 year old book and says, what do I do? And I'm not going to get specific. I'm just going to ask, first thoughts?
Revise and re-release, do a new edition, get a new cover treatment. I mean, you do have to kind of think about, well, what went wrong? Sometimes you did your best at marketing and promoting, like you were really strategic or thoughtful and you put together a plan and you executed it and you just didn't get sales. I also meet other clients who did not do anything, like literally nothing, or life intervened. You know, there are a lot of stories about how a parent got sick or something happened and you just weren't able to support the book in the way that you wanted to. So you do have to kind of think about, well, why didn't it go somewhere? Was it through lack of support, or did I get something wrong fundamentally about the cover? Like we just, talked about the cover, the importance of the cover. Is the title off? Is there something I need to improve about that foundation? There's a story that Joanna Penn tells about her nonfiction book about how to market a book, where she failed on the first iteration. She failed on the title. And when she got the right title, she immediately improved her sales because she was more literal and specific about the book's benefit. So like it can be something that simple, where you make this fix and it all starts to come together, and then the marketing and promotion that you do is all that much more effective. So that's where I'd start.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. And guys, there's no sacred cows. I know you love your title, but maybe it's not the best title, and maybe, I know you love your cover, but if the book isn't working, I want to echo what Jane said, try again, but also your writers, write the next book. That you got to know when it's time to move on. After a while, your book is going to stand on its own or it's not. And no amount of shoring it up or patching, it's not worth the effort anymore. So in my mind, I always have a date in mind and a certain level of activities that when I've done everything I can do and when it's time to move on and write the next book. Yes, I can try and rewrite this book, but why? We're writers, right? So write your next book. Jane, thank you so much for a full hour of brilliance. Where are you traveling next? What conferences are you going to in the next little bit? Are you going anywhere?
I am. I'm going to London Book Fair in March, where I'm going to be mainly reporting for Hot Sheet, looking at trends. And I'll also be speaking on a panel for authors. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to be going to the Irma Bombeck workshop in Dayton, Ohio.
I love that one.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Unfortunately, it's sold out.
Every year. It sells out within days.
Yeah. And I'm going to be at the Maryland Writers Association conference, which is right outside of DC at the end of March. I don't believe they're sold out yet. So if you're in the DC area, check that out.
All right. Well, Jane, I have fun in London. I know we saw each other briefly in London last year. I'm not going to make it this year. But I want to thank everyone for their questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, but I promise I asked them as fast as I could. And Jane, safe travels, and I will see you at janefriedman.com. I'm going to sign up for the class that you're doing on websites because I'm curious. And for the rest of you, I will see you next Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, here at Free Advice Friday.